continue to watch, in many cases with horror, what's going on in Israel, in Gaza, and in the West Bank, and throughout the country. I mean, many people who have been intimately familiar with this conflict over the years have said this is the most amount of widespread violence against the Palestinian people, against Palestinians, that we've seen in maybe in decades. Because on one hand, we have this military conflict with an incredibly asymmetrical conflict. We have an incredibly powerful Israeli army and air force, and a population that is essentially in what has been described for probably a decade in an open air prison. But what we're also seeing, that is, we're not only seeing the violence perpetrated on Palestinians living in East Jerusalem, in this neighborhood that the Israeli government and settlers and sort of self-appointed, I hesitate to call them vigilante groups, because they're really not responding to anything except for the existence of Palestinians living there, who are attempting to cleanse them to expel them from their own homes. We also have violence that is spreading around the country. I want to play this image of, comes from Louis Fishman. I don't know if he is the one who wrote an article in Haaretz about this. Is it the same person who shot it, Brendan, as wrote the piece?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, here is footage that comes from, I believe it's Bat Yam in Israel. It is south of Tel Aviv. This is a Palestinian-owned ice cream shop, and it is being attacked and by young Israelis. At the very least, I see Talis on some of these attackers. So it suggests at least some of them are very religious. I would imagine the vast majority of them are, frankly, which is not the case with Israel writ large. People should understand that. And it's incredibly disturbing footage. This is not, a protest where people are starting to riot. It is an attack on a ice cream shop because it's Palestinian owned. Let's look at the footage of this, and it's particularly disturbing for people who understand and know the history of how the Holocaust came about.
Kristallnacht. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So this recalls Kristallnacht, which took place in the 30s in Germany, and was one of the early signs. It was essentially an organized book burning and smashing of Jewish shopkeepers' windows in the night of broken glass. And obviously, I'm just looking at the, sort of the more the veneer of it is certainly, that's the first thing that I thought about. I mean, I don't know who those people are. I don't know the context. We don't necessarily have the same sort of, it's not a direct analogy. I'm just talking on a sheer emotional level. That is what the first thing that occurred to me when I saw those images. It's very incredibly disturbing.
Well, I mean, it's impossible not to think that, right? I mean, as I said yesterday on the program, we saw that footage of Mohammed al-Kurd, who has been on Democracy Now! On CNN, and then recently on MSNBC, explaining the Palestinian experience. He is a resident, I believe, of Sheikh Jarrah, and he was forcibly removed from his home yesterday after speaking out against Israel. And then you see images of glass being shattered of Palestinian shops. And as Sam said, I mean, how do you not think about these images? And how do you not think of the incredible irony and the cyclical nature of generational trauma from the Holocaust here? I mean, this is the targeting of an ethnic group, and in many cases, a different religious group, by a government that is being led by a far-right leader and has immense power comparatively. And I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
This was the video, at least some people who posted it. One person, Louis Fishman, wrote, I guess in a tweet, organized pogrom took place in Arabs in Bat Yam, despite the fact that they all learned about Kristall Nacht. Today in my Haaretz article, I wrote, "We need to see what a blatantly racist society we have become. I wish I had been wrong." That's this writer in Haaretz, but I think that sort of captures sort of the feel for that. Meanwhile, at the White House today, Joe Biden, answering questions, had this to say regarding the conflict.
Are you concerned about the violence in the Middle East? And can you talk about what conversations you have had with officials there?
My national security staff and defense staff has been in constant contact with their counterparts in the Middle East, not just with the Israelis, but also with everyone from the Egyptians to the Saudis to the Emiratis, et cetera. And I had a conversation with Bibi Netanyahu not too long ago. I'll be putting out a statement very shortly on that. My expectation and hope is that this will be closing down sooner than later. But Israel has a right to defend itself when you have thousands of rockets flying into your territory. But I had a conversation for a while with the Prime Minister of Israel, and I think that my hope is that we'll see this coming to conclusion sooner than later. Thank you.
A couple of things that are really sort of stunning about this response. Again, the word Palestinian doesn't come up. He's spoken to leaders who are not directly involved in this. He's spoken to the leader that is waging, at the very least, at least one half of the war, but the violence that's breaking out across the country. I mean, leave aside for even the moment the rockets and the air power that is being unleashed here. What's happening across the country in terms of these attacks and in terms of these expulsions, we should in and of itself warrant some type of condemnation, repudiation, or conversation or addressing. But the idea that there's not even the word Palestinians does not even come up in that answer. And it is a completely open-ended question. They didn't even say Israel, Palestine in the question. They just said the violence in the Middle East. And the idea that there's not, the word Palestinian doesn't come out of Joe Biden's mouth. And the idea that the Palestinians have no right to defend themselves, to protect their homes, to protect their ice cream shops, to protect their children. It's just it's sheer insanity, and I don't think that, again, this is one of those situations where I think the American public, and there's going to be a lot more pressure on the Biden administration, I think, than they have anticipated in this circumstance. We are in a different era, and I think we're at the beginning of that different era. And I
83 people, including 17 children, killed in Gaza. No recognition by Joe Biden. No mention of the Palestinians. No acknowledgement of the power differential. And when, people say, but Hamas, but the Palestinians, that is the equivalent of really saying all lives matter in the United States when talking about Black Lives Matter in response to that, because you are purposefully ignoring and willfully ignoring the power differentials and the use of state violence versus the people who are being oppressed and the apartheid. I mean, that is the framework with which Joe Biden is operating, and there is systemic racism involved in both of those scenarios. And there is a deep cognitive dissonance in Washington that, Biden pretends to be woke all of a sudden now. But yeah, this includes that too. I mean, you've got to have an international perspective on this. It's like a disgusting statement by Biden, who seemed like he didn't even want to be there.
I have no doubt he didn't want to be there.